All right, let's talk about Make in India. Back in 2014, it launched as one of the biggest, most ambitious manufacturing pushes you've ever seen. It was supposed to be a total game changer. But, a decade later, the reality? Well, it's a lot more complicated than the promise. So, what really happened? Let's dig in.
And you got to understand, this was never just some dry economic policy, no. It was pitched as a silver bullet for everything. A fix for chronic unemployment, a way to stop relying on imports, and the ticket for millions to join the middle class. It was huge. It was the promise of a whole new Indian dream.
And the goal they set was crystal clear, super ambitious. They wanted to get manufacturing share of the entire economy up to a massive 25%. The idea was to basically transform India into a global manufacturing powerhouse. Just one number, but a whole sweeping vision behind it.
So yeah, the promise itself was incredibly simple and really powerful. If we build more factories, we become a stronger nation. Manufacturing was sold as this amazing engine that would solve all of India's biggest problems and kickstart a whole new era of prosperity.
And for a while, it really looked like it was working. On the surface, the strategy seemed like a massive success. The government was just brilliant to projecting this image of a country completely transforming itself, almost overnight.
You couldn't miss it. The symbols of progress were absolutely everywhere. You had that iconic mechanical lion logo, these glitzy, high-profile investment summits with CEOs from all over the world, and just a constant flood of news about new factories opening and export numbers going up and up. The whole visual story was so powerful. And that combination of sharp visuals and powerful storytelling, wow, it was incredibly effective. It created this story of unstoppable growth, of modernization happening right before your eyes. And it was a story that was so easy to believe because the symbols felt so real, so tangible.
But, and there's always a but, isn't there? Behind all those powerful symbols, a very different reality was starting to emerge. The data, the actual numbers, were beginning to tell a story that went way beyond the flashy announcements, and it raised some serious questions about what success really means. Because here's the thing, you can't measure real economic strength with photo ops and press releases. That's not how it works. To really get what was going on, the true impact, you have to look at a much more important metric.
And that metric is something called employment elasticity. Now, it sounds kind of technical, but the idea is actually super simple and really profound. It just asks, for every little bit of economic growth you get, how many actual jobs are you creating? That is the real test of whether growth is actually helping the people who need it most. And that's the central question of this whole thing. When you look past the headlines, when you judge this entire policy on its #1 promise, creating jobs, well, the picture starts to look dramatically different. This gets us to the absolute core of the problem, the massive disconnect between just making more stuff and actually creating more jobs. And as we're about to see, those two things are not the same at all, and that difference is everything.
Okay, this chart right here just lays the problem out in the starkest terms. Look at that first bar for output growth. See how it's just shooting up? Incredible. But now, look at the bar right next to it, the one for employment share in manufacturing. It's flat, totally stagnant. The factories were pumping out more goods, but they weren't hiring more people to do it. The engine was running, but the jobs trained was left at the station.
And man, this quote from our source material just captures the entire issue perfectly. It is such a powerful and dead-on diagnosis of the whole situation. The country was hoping for factories that would hire its huge workforce, but instead, it got a completely different kind of factory.
So let's break down that critical difference. What India got was a model based on just assembling products, putting together high-value parts like chips and screens that were imported from other countries. That creates a lot of visibility, right? You can see the finished phone or TV. But what India actually needed was to build factories that hire tons of people and to gain control over the core technology itself. That's where the real economic power and the real jobs.
So how did this happen? Well, the government's main tool was something called Production-Linked Incentive Schemes, or PLIs. You can just think of it as a cash bonus for hitting big production targets. The problem is, a system like that naturally rewards the huge, highly automated factories that can just churn out goods with very few workers. It doesn't help the smaller, more labor-intensive businesses that are the real engines of job creation.
At the exact same time, they were changing labor laws to make it easier for companies to hire and fire people, trying to attract more investment. But here's the paradox. You can make it as easy as you want for a company to hire someone, but if they just don't need more workers in the first place, nothing changes. Flexibility can't just create jobs out of thin air.
When you add all of this up, you get to the final diagnosis.
The problem wasn't just a few flawed policies here and there. It was a deep structural misalignment between the strategy they chose and the actual reality of the country's economy.
So you might be asking yourself, hey, if the job situation was so weak, why did this narrative of incredible success stick around for so long? Well, it's because the successes were visible. You can take a photograph of a shiny new factory. You can announce record-breaking export numbers. But the struggle of not being able to find a good job, that's invisible. That's a private struggle, repeated millions and millions of times over.
This table here illustrates that mismatch perfectly. On one side, you have the reality of India's workforce. It's huge, it's young, and it's mostly semi-skilled. Now look at the other side, the Make in India strategy. It rewarded capital over labor, massive scale over smaller businesses, and just pure speed over deep skill building. The two they didn't line up at all. It was like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
And this really brings us to the core thesis of this whole explainer. You can have rising output, you can have beautiful, shiny new factories, but if that doesn't translate into real, widespread jobs and opportunity for your people, it's incomplete. It's a hollow kind of power.
So at the end of the day, Make in India was a huge success as a signal to the rest of the world, a powerful statement of intent, but it faltered as a solution for its own people. It made the classic mistake of equating production with progress. And the result was a boom in output that just failed to create a boom in opportunity for everyone else.
And all of this leaves us with one final and really crucial question to think about. If a growth model creates more stuff, but not more good jobs, it forces us all to step back and ask, what does true progress actually look like? What should a country really be building for?